Good evening, everyone, and welcome to Inspirare India's first web talk in a series that we have called Art House, Hot House. Before I go any further, a few words about Inspirare India. And before I do that, let me introduce myself. I'm Debashish Lahiri on behalf of Inspirare India. I'm also wishing a very good afternoon to our viewers in Europe and the UK. Inspirare India was born as an idea about 3 years ago in 2017 and has seen many an up and down in its 3 years. At one point, it was a lost cause. Perhaps only St. Jude might have rescued such a lost cause. We have gone through crisis of faiths and we've come back. The idea, the dream that was Inspirare India has been resilient. And we are so lucky that we are here today to begin a journey which promises to itself the task of looking at different art forms and finding a common language in a world that is plagued with differences, with divisiveness, and of course, lately the pandemic. In several of these trying situations and regimes which would not hear the voices of the people, art and only art can become the conscience, the voice, the insurrection, the way forward, whatever. It can break down barriers, it can touch hearts, it can move minds, it can enunciate new philosophies and ways of thinking, and of course it can make us live better in this world. So Inspirare India has a big objective and a big set of promises to keep, but we also have a huge resolve, borne out by difficulties through which we have come to emerge in front of you here today. And before I actually give it over to my co-moderator for this evening's event, Dr. Pradipta Mukherjee, to take it forward, I would also want to say one word perhaps about the idea behind Art House, Hot House. We all know a hot house is for plants which need temperate atmosphere, temperate climates. Art needs such a climate of inspiration, of confidence building, of support. And Inspirare India, although we have the name India and our location and our roots are firmly Indian, let me say at the very outset, is international in its scope. Because we believe that articulations and collaborations in the world of art, strengthening each other's work and each other's network of ideas, is only possible in an international or internationally projected scope of things. So with that in mind, I now hand it over to my co-moderator, Dr. Mukherjee, to take the evening forward and introduce the special guest that we have delivering our first talk this evening. Pradipta, please.
Thank you, Debashish. Hello, everyone. A warm welcome to all of you from Inspirare India. A hearty and very warm welcome to Madam Chrys Salt, MBE, poet, playwright, artistic director of the Bakehouse, Scotland. She is here with us this evening and she has a rather interesting presentation to deliver. She will speak on Skookum Jim and the Klondike Goldrush, particularly with reference to her collection of poems. It is indeed a pleasure to have Madam Chrys Salt, whose talk will be live in a few minutes from now, all the way from Scotland. This is Inspirare India's first live web talks in the series Art House, Hot House. It has been raining all day in Kolkata, but Chris's jovial presence has lighted up our cloudy Kolkata evening. A word for our audience, please bear with us in case of any technical glitch or issues related to poor net connectivity. Before we move on to Madam Chrys Salt's presentation, I would like to say a few words on Inspirare India, the organization that is hosting Chrys Salt this evening in Kolkata. It is a proud moment for us because Inspirare India is reaching out to a world audience and has gone truly global. A year back, we had managed to take an interview of Cynthia Hayes at the Ramakrishna Mission Institute of Culture, Gold Park, and that was not on the virtual platform because Cynthia Hayes was in Kolkata for the event. Inspirare India is an art and cultural organization based in Kolkata, and literature, art, and culture is its primary focus. Inspirare India hopes to share its pursuits with a broader creative, cultural, and academic community. We hope this organization will be able to bridge the gap between academics and cultural activities, between scholarly exchange of ideas and creative arts. When me and my friend Debashish decided to launch Inspirare India along with a strong executive advisory board, we felt an urgent need to create a space, create a platform, both physical and virtual, that we thought was somehow had gone missing. Once we decided to have Inspirare India, we thought it would be worthwhile to engage with this fantastic, very challenging new prospect. We hope this organization will play a crucial role in creating spaces for merging several art forms for various literary, art, and cultural exchanges. The interface of literature with sister arts like literature and cinema, fiction and film, poetry and painting, music and photography, or say poetry and performing arts shall be on offer in several events that are in the offing in the months to come. Let's hope Inspirare India will act as a creative venue for students, researchers, faculties to engage in debates, discussions, seminars, conferences, and me and my friend Debashish hope some meaningful cultural dialogue would get generated that would significantly contribute to the existing literary and cultural discourses. Very humbly speaking, that's how we hope our dream venture, Inspirare India, is going to transcend barriers or be truly interdisciplinary or be rather multidisciplinary. And we hope this platform will deliver good content and help us reach a wider transnational audience. But one thing goes without saying, Inspirare India is not for its makers. It's for people who have joined hands to create this much needed art organization. And it's for you all, for both young talents and matured artists, budding scholars, as well as experienced, very senior academicians and artists. Your engagement, your support would indeed help us pursue the path, explore unknown domains, explore fresh ventures, and take the road not taken. With this short introduction, I would now like to introduce Madam Chrys Salt in a slightly greater detail. Madam Chrys Salt is a poet with roots deeply planted in the theatre. Poetry and theatre are already coming together in Inspirare India. She has produced 4 full poetry collections and 4 pamphlet collections and has performed on BBC radios 3 and 4 and done readings at venues and festivals across the UK, USA, Canada, France, Germany, Finland, and India at the Kolkata Book Fair and Australia, where she was the international poet at the Tasmanian Poetry Festival last year. She has been the recipient of awards and bursaries, including a National Media Award, a new writing bursary from English Arts Council, a Work Development Award from Creative Scotland, a French First from Edinburgh Festival. In recent years, she has been the recipient of 2 Creative Scotland bursaries, one for completing her collection, Dancing on a Rock, and the most recent for research in the Yukon for this collection called Skookum Jim and the Klondike Goldrush. She's published by award-winning publisher Indigo Dreams Publishing. She was awarded an MBE for services to the arts in the Queen's Birthday Honours List 2014. A very warm welcome to Chrys Salt. Chrys would be talking about the 1896 Klondike Gold Rush. While recounting her visit to Yukon, she will certainly touch on the brilliant gold rush accounts by Canadian writers. She will probably bring into account the experiences of the stampeders. While recounting the stories of miners, she would probably discuss the perilous journey the migrants undertook to the gold fields, the suffering of the Native Americans and the impact on their livelihoods, the impact on their culture, on their way of living, how everything changed because of the gold rush, its social, cultural, its environmental impact. But Chrys has informed us that this would not be a retelling of history. Her poems would not purport to retell that history. So we are expecting something rather engaging, something rather challenging that has shaped up in Chris's mind to enthrall her audience. It was indeed a pleasure to know that Chrys was awarded a Creative Scotland Fellowship to continue her research for her collection Skookum Jim and the Klondike Goldrush. It offered her the wonderful opportunity to return to Yukon, the fascinating landscape, and continue her in-depth research. So with this very brief introduction, I would now hand over the session to my friend Devashish.
Pradipta, and welcome again, Chrys, to Inspirare India. I think Chrys is going to talk about, I mean, of course, the central character, the name that is embossed on the cover of her book and which forms the title of her latest book, Skookum Jim, is Skookum Jim, or Quiche, or Skookum Jim Mason, someone who actually discovered or the gold quite accidentally perhaps, and the word of that got around to America, and of course, as Pradipta mentioned, the stampeders, the people who went north and west in search of gold, in search of instant richness, instant stardom, and an instant establishment. So, you know, we have to tell ourselves that America was going through a little bit of a recession at that point in time. And so the news of the prospectors striking gold, the early prospectors striking gold, and coming from those Aboriginal territories was a kind of a message to Moses from God that the promised land had been sighted or something like that. So one has to understand the rush and what that did, and Chrys will outline that through the wonderful poetry that she has produced in this volume. The journey that she has undertaken, it's a parallel journey, but I think Pradipta was mentioning research, but I think the most important research on the part of a poet, a practicing writer, is to somehow embed himself or herself in those contexts. It's not exactly possible to retell that story, but then again, the imaginative audacity and the commitment of a writer to somehow reach down to the depths of that suffering, the pain, the privation, the unsaid, the untold, whatever was left hanging, possibly, which learned intellectual critiques might somehow miss in all its theorizations. So I think a writer can really get through the cracks, the crevices, and reach something way down below that is still burning, that is still worth narration, that is still worth bringing out. So Chrys, I'm sure, will take us on that journey, that magical journey into the spaces of northern Canada, and ultimately lead us to several interesting questions about which we might talk a little bit more critically later on, after Chrys has delivered her talk, has read her poems. So I'm really looking forward to knowing Chrys's poetry from before, and having the privilege of having had some of the poems that Chrys shared with me over the period of time from Skookum Jim. I'm really looking forward to this evening of great delight, passion, enlightenment, and imaginative extension. Please, Chrys, take over for the evening.
Thank you. And first of all, thank you so much for the honour of hosting me as the first event at Inspirare India. I couldn't have wished for a better introduction. Thank you both so much for that. I'll get straight to the point. In 1896, the Klondike Goldrush enticed tens of thousands of people from across the world to the Yukon territories in northern Canada, to Dawson City and the goldfields beyond. People came from the USA, across the globe, sacrificed everything they had in the often fruitless quest for gold. And some of them became very rich. Unfortunately, most of them did not, and ended up working for the Klondike Kings, who were the people who did become very rich. Some of them never went home. I first visited the Yukon in 2013. I travelled north with local relatives to the capital in Whitehorse, and I learned a little bit then about the gold rush at the heart of Yukon history, and I was hooked. I came back, started to write, tried to write, wrote a long iambic pentameter diatribe that went on for about 3,000 words, decided it was rubbish, and knew I needed to go back to write what I needed to write. So as Debashish said, in 2017, I went back on the back of a generous open lottery funding from Creative Scotland, which I'm incredibly grateful, because it enabled me to go to all sorts of places I'd never have imagined going to without it. So that enabled me to continue my researches for this book, Skookum Jim and the Klondike Goldrush. And it was Skookum Jim Mason, whose First Nation name Keish, with a small party of prospectors, including his white American friend, George Carmack, who found gold in Rabbit Creek, that inspired that great stampede. And I like to think it was Keish's kindness in rescuing a coast frog from a ditch and the mystery of dreams that led to that great discovery. But more of that in a minute. There are accounts of the gold rush from fine writers, which you probably read, like Jack London, Tappan Adney, and stories, of course, from Robert Service, who wrote lots of poems about the experience, although he, in fact, never actually went there. He came from Preston in the UK and headed there as a banker and picked up stories from the local pub from various miners who had been. And there are important archives in Whitehorse and Carcross, and we visited most of them. Seattle, the Gold Rush Museum in Seattle, I come to that again in a minute, and fantastic cultural collections in First Nation archives as well. But as Debashish says, poems do not purport to talk of history. And this is not really the province of poetry, but through that lens, I'm attempting to forge links between now and 19th century North America, and explore the colonial prejudices and exploitation, the fate of the First Nations, whose livelihoods and lands were destroyed by that great stampede. They're written in a sequence, they're not always chronological, and each poem sort of sounding off the one before it. So I will, obviously it's an edited version of the book, but I'll try to clarify a few things you might need to know along the way. And if you have any questions, I'll do my best to answer them at the end, although it was such a long time ago that I wrote this book that I hope I can answer them. I'll begin with the poems. The storyteller. He has an ear in every pie, dressing up box full of words. Wear this, he says. The voice of caribou, skin stretched and scraped to thinness, stitched with bone, made fine with beadwork, decorative quills, a coat to dress your story in. I try it on. Or this, the voice of frog, be puppeteer, slip your hands in hers, webbed fingers fitting like a glove, make songs for her, spin dreams anew. Or this, the raven's voice, a trickster's voice, disguised, transformed, made otherwise. Then, from the bottom of the box, a voice I recognize, a voice that lost its voice in someone else's narrative of stolen land, fishing and hunting grounds, mountains, chewed up and vomited. It fitted me. I wear my own voice now, strut it inside the covers of a book, string puppets for my songs, revive some willing ghosts of words to dance my stories on. The next poem is called Raven, and it's adapted from a First Nation legend. Like many cultures, First Nations have their version of the creation story. I believe India has quite a few. And this is from the point of view of the raven. It started dark when only fire was bright. I heard inside a box, inside a box, inside a box, inside the smallest one, an old man by the river kept the light. The world wanted it, and so I hatched a plan. I changed into a needle from a pine, and when his granddaughter came down to drink, fingered her pathway down from tree to tree, I jumped inside her darkling cup. She drank and swallowed me. I waited in her, grew and grew, came into their house when time was due. A human child I seemed to be, my round black eyes invisible. Wily I waited, learned the tongues of men until that old man loved me like a son. I begged and begged just once to hold the light, to see it shine. So much by then he loved and trusted me, opened up the smallest box to please, and lovely light leapt from it. And I was raven then before he knew. I grabbed light in my beak and flew straight up his smoke hole to the waiting dark. Light spilt and freckled darkness as I sped, orbs round and gold rolled out for sky to hold. And there was light, so all could see the beauty of the world. For countless generations, the First Nations have had a unique and respectful tie with the land. They don't claim ownership of it, but rather declare a sense of stewardship to it and to all its creatures. And this poem seeks to capture something of that idea. It's called Skookum Jim's Childhood 1850s, and it's entirely imaginative. Tight in a blanket he rode on his mother, child of the wolf clan. Bear was his brother, ran where the moose ran, bronze brown and laughing, knew what his bones knew before his arriving. Tales of the Yukon passed on with the telling. Smelled the moon rising before night was waking, saw big winds whisper before leaves were shaking. Whip crack of dawnlight, first spring ice breaking, portent of snowslide in the years turning, tracked as a wolf might, the caribou's wandering, learned at his making. When words are spoken, there is no unsaying. When earth is broken, there is no returning. So in the midst of the 1880s, Skookum Jim worked as a packer, carrying heavy supplies for white miners over the Chilkoot Pass, which was one of the dangerous routes to the gold fields, along with the White Pass. One started at Skagway, the White Pass started at Skagway, the Chilkoot Pass started at Dyea. He was nicknamed Skookum because that means big and strong in Chinook jargon. I spoke in my intro about the power of dreams and how Jim rescued a coast frog from a ditch. So this is the first Frog Song 1, and it's from the point of view of the frog in the ditch. I was exhausted, desperate, flailing at rock slide, no escape, no purchase on the slimy side, then scooped from mud and grit, saw my green watchfulness as from afar, cupped in the furnace of strange hands, my tongue protruded, ready to touch his. Then, oh, release, a flight through light and air, free fall, bright swill and cool anointing balm, weed stroking, bubble dappled deeps, the silk smooth element, washing the frantic moment clean. He only hears me croak, would that his ear might catch the nuances. He did not hear me offer him my skin, but stood for several moments on the bank, a mirrored shadow, gazing down. Too big and strong he seemed for gentleness. And then, content to see me dive, grew small and disappeared into the trees. To First Nations, a frog apparently symbolizes wealth and abundance, and if a frog's tongue touches another creature, it represents the sharing of knowledge and power. I've been looking for a frog ever since. After Skookum had rescued the coast frog from a ditch, the story goes that he gets beaten up by a white man. He's kicked in the stomach and the wound becomes infected, and he's very near to death until the grateful frog comes to his rescue and appears to him as wealth woman in a dream, and tells him he'll find his fortune in the north, which of course he does. He does. He's coming to Frog Song 2. He knew my glittering eyes from dreams ago. His wound's bright mouth was closing where I licked. I stayed with him, sang frog song on his bed, nested in gifts of swan's down, silk thread, coloured beads. How frog was born of the last snowflakes, how being small became a mountain, how he would live life like a story when the wound was clean, passed on from mouth to mouth, the tale of Skookum's dream. Storytelling amongst First Nations is an oral tradition, and stories are handed down from mouth to mouth and generation to generation, told and retold. And one of the conceits, if you like, of this book is that these stories have been passed on to me, and I'm reinterpreting them for you. This is the third frog song. When ravens stole the sun and a day was made, mine was a gift of elements to pass from land to water, enter dreams, sing frog song in the ears of men. I shine, I shimmer, as in dreams I can. I slip inside him, secret as a wish. They sweetmeats at his door lead him in woman shape through gilded rooms, past glistering furniture. Show him a window pointing north, a twisty trail, a mountain sliced to stairs, arrows of water leaping, red ravines, uncharted ways to salmon runs. Set him by Hammer Water's child, chattering round rock in slips of light. Give him a gold-tipped walking stick, bear meat, a pig, a cooking pan. Show him in weedy deeps, earthlight and lantern shine, beneath dark wings of overhanging pine. The Hammer Water is the First Nation name for the Klondike, and Rabbit Creek was where Cage and his small party made their rich discovery, and it's one of the Yukon tributaries. Obviously missing some of the story out for you, but we come now to Love in Three Acts. George Carmack, the white prospector who went with Skookum to discover gold, met Skookum Jim's sister, and in Carcross, where they were all heading across the Chilkoot Pass to carry supplies for the white miners, and they fall in love. George is known amongst white miners as Squaw Man, because white men marrying First Nation women was not entirely looked on with favour. This is Love in Three Acts, Act 1. She'll sneak sly smiles at him, her jet hair looping over cooking pots. Stitched trousers lined with fur, mittens of rabbit skin, sew moccasins, cook tongues of caribou, his favourite. Teach him to set traps for fish, snare ptarmigan, harvest berries, hunt like wolves. He'll learn to pack 100 pounds of bacon up the Chilkoot Pass, as well as any Indian. She'll love his paler skin, his thatch moustache, eyes blue as irises, yearn for the tickle of his kiss. He'll leave behind the orphaned boy in California, rancher, marine, deserter, travelling man, learn Tagish, tribal dances, what their dreams foretold. Bring nothing but the fever left in him. Find nothing yet but glints and promises. Her sky becomes his sky, her ways, his ways. He'll call it, her name is Shaw Tla, but he'll call her Kate. Embedded in First Nation culture are the magic of dreams, and George Carmack had his own dream. He dreamt of he'd gone to find gold, but the dream showed him some gold salmon swimming in a stream, and he thought that meant he'd have more luck catching fish than prospecting for gold, which he'd been doing for quite a long time. So this one is from the point of view of the salmon, and it's George's dream. When the last snowflake fell, Frog came again. Then, as the season turned, our kind, grown big from fingerlings to feed the river folk. Frog told us of her pact with man, how we must go to seek a dreamscape in a white man's head, how we will have no tongue but glittering, must enter in where mint green water ran. We came embossed in scales of gold, equipped and shining for a dream she'd made. Our tails, gold rudders, nugget eyes, fins laced with gold as fine as filigree. The biggest of our kind we were, deep-bellied, golden with frogs' messages. We muscled, surfaced, swam where grayling showed, appeared to him in leaping light. Danced it askance when fingers reached to catch the moment, to keep it whole, as men in dreaming think they might. We were not privy to his waking thought, but in the gap that dreams slip through, unmaking us, we saw him gaze across the creek's bright course, perplexed and wondering. The story goes that he woke up, holding onto his ear, thinking he was able to catch the dream. Of course, the dream was wrong. The dream meant that when they were fishing, they accidentally found some gold. This poem is it's called Tourist Tableau Bonanza Creek, and we visited that creek in 2017. And it's where, of course, the prospectors made their first big discovery, renamed Bonanza for obvious reasons. Tourist Tableau, Bonanza Creek, 2017. The metal cutouts are identical. Trousers tucked into boots, wide miners' hats. No telling which is white man, Indian. One waves his arms and pan aloft. Another kneels, appears to pan the grass. The third looks on, his gold pan dangling. The tourist tableau misses everything. The corn-bright dime-sized nugget found by accident, the water, moss and green on which it ran, amazement far too big for measurement, jumping, hallooing, pounding feet, bear steaks, sizzling for a feast, wet boots forgotten in their singing time of how they came to be here, desperate days, empty gold pans, hunger, sucking slush, journeys over numbing permafrost, barren rivers, sodden underbrush. How they slept sweetly on that day, rolled in their sleeping robes as fire died, dreams lulled by frog song, salmon prophecy. After the great big find in Rabbit Creek, there were quite a few prospectors in the Klondike, and they, of course, took advantage of the find, and some of them made some very, very big strikes. This is about the Portland steamer docking in Seattle in July 1897. I wasn't actually there, but it disgorged 68 early prospectors who had shared more than a ton of gold between them. And the headline in the local newspaper just read, "Gold, gold, gold, gold." And the great stampede was on. This is from the point of view of one of those early prospectors' wives in Seattle. Before that steamer docked, we just got on with it. Baked bread, cut timber, landed fish, shopped in Bon Marché, paid off loans. It took one headline to upend the Times, inject sane men with lunacy. Men off the boat, exhausted, jubilant, fortunes in bags, sacks, blankets, coffee cans, lives opening up to possibility. Joe left his job, said he'd no time for that. Some story about gophers that could gnaw through permafrost, a house as light as air you could pack flat with iron stove and double bed. Who's mining who, I said. The city emptied. ovens cooled, storekeepers abandoned shops, meat, cheese on counters left to rot, drivers abandoned streetcars on the spot. Clerks, merchants, longshoremen, my dad, our next door neighbor, friends, mortgaged their houses, took out loans, cashed in their future. No turning back. Joe bought his outfit, flour, bacon, beans, booked a passage on some filthy barge so jammed with gear I marveled it could float. News leaked back of avalanches, pounded boats, men whipped at posts and shot for thieving, horrid tales of dead men and rotting horses on the trails. I wrote, but no reply of promised riches, nothing came. Our Billy cried for him, asked how long, where, and why. Had nothing but a stupid photograph. Joe in his shirt sleeves posing with the dog. Fake snow. Painted mountain backdrop. Pines. Low sun. Foot on a prop sledge. Shouldering a gun. There are some photographs of that time, and before the men went, they posed for photographs. None of them having any idea what they were letting themselves in for. This one is called the Chilkoot Pass, and we climbed a couple of miles up the pass, one of the dangerous routes to the goldfields, and it was summer, and we certainly got some idea of how very difficult that journey might have been. Chilkoot Pass. We scramble up the pass in single file between the berries and the brush, each careful foot secured on grit and shale, tree roots, broken branches, rolling cone. On wider paths, we squeeze aside for serious walkers who are kitted out with backpacks, panniered dogs, and proper boots, trekking the trail right to the end, like those who came a century ago. Need, and hunger in their bones so deep it drove them on against all odds, bitten by blizzards, flesh grown gangrenous to claw at hope in mindless wastes of snow, or gasping for air under an avalanche, a longed for letter hugged against the heart. Billy does well at school. How fast they grow. It's now a hiker's route, just manageable. We grabble over boulders, edge sheer drops, afraid we'll miss our footing, fall. Dear love, we will be reunited soon. I know. Joe wishes for the internet. What if my words could on some quick wind fly? Your reply would be immediate if photographs of home could wing through air across this wilderness, arrive warmed through, or better still, I could appear an apparition in our house and moving, speaking, see our children play, show you this queue of misery behind, above me, hardly human, grim, corpses of horses we had trodden on, could tell you eye to eye how absence feels, how every day I think of you, tell you however harsh the way, there's nothing worse than coming empty-handed home. I write so many letters, dear, receive so few. One of our trips, we went up the Yukon in a rowing boat from came across Beaver Mountain, which is where First Nation people would have looked up the river to watch supplies coming for their village. So this is what the lookout saw, 1897, Beaver Mountain. The Yukon winds its arms round inlets, reed beds, stranded isles, glacial silt, washed down from mountains to the river's lip, sheer sandbanks, undercut by currents, topped with swallows' nests. He's standing where he always stands, high on the warty outcrop. Look out for bark canoes, graceful, marvellously light, skimming towards the village with their wares. Not for this silence, shredded to a din, these shrieking cows, this spume, this smash, this loud flotilla on the water snake. How could there be so many in the world? Swift on his moccasins, he scrambles down. He shouts in the fields, he shouts in the fish camp, he runs like the hare to tell them. He tells them that the white man comes again, lights fires on their land, takes fish for dog food, scares the moose, cuts down trees, tramples the sweetgrass, turns mountains inside out. Until our fallen warriors return, the wise chief says, we will be moose calves in a land of wolves. Song of the wise chieftain. When they came like the mosquito, chieftain told Raven, Raven, fly away with our songs, for no one else must sing them. When Hammerwater spoke, chattering tongues on salmon weirs and hunting grounds, chieftain asked Moon to light 3 fires to save them. When mountains spoke, steeps, hollows eaten out in one short, fickle season, chieftain asked Bear to store their memories till times became good to share them. Love in 3 acts, exact 2. The family photograph taken of George Carmack and Kate after they had become very rich. They're in California. The photograph, California, 1898. Hair parted slick and short, moustache clipped neat and tame, wing collar, waistcoat, picking cuffs, hands round an ornamental cane. Her mane a comely topknot now, her posture plump and matronly, a chain of nuggets loop across a formal blouse of life, worn patiently. Perched on a pillar in a pretty frock, their brown-skinned daughter holds a rose. George, Kate, and Graffy, California. The perfect family, one might suppose. Love in 3 acts, Act 3. She'll hang her nugget necklace on a tree, run barefoot with their daughter in the woods, spear red-legged frogs, shoot off the heads of rattlesnakes for fun, trap squirrels for the cooking pot. He'll appear in photographs without her, bank his cash, buy real estate, a motor car, dine with the fashionable set, feel lucky, stake more claims, meet one more suited to his risen star. She'll grow mad with drink and jealousy in hotel corridors, break down doors. The dusky squaw man's savage spouse, crooning wild and warlike melodies. She'll get arrested, make the newspapers. He'll rail against that woman's savage brawls, file lawsuits, fight for custody, marry his Yankee paramour, send Kate empty-handed home. George married an American woman called Marguerite Lemay, a socialite with a somewhat dubious background, and he discarded Kate, she was unable to prove that she'd actually been married to him. It was a common law marriage. So she was dispatched back to Carcross and had lost custody of the child. Who first found that nugget in Rabbit Creek remains matter for disputes, and some of the stories actually suggest it might have been Kate. But as George Carmack had registered the claim, being a white man, he was the only one who could. Indians or First Nation people were not allowed to register claims. He took the credit. In fact, his biography, autobiography, suggests that nobody else really was there apart from him, ostensibly to erase links with the First Nation family he abandoned when striking it rich. As I mentioned earlier, Dyea is one of the towns at the beginning of the Chilkoot Pass. We visited there when we were over. This one is called Dyea 2017, a slide cemetery. It's now a ghost town. Palm Sunday avalanche, 1898. On tidal flats in Dyea now are fields and fields of irises. I think of Flanders and the poppies there. Wonder what strange memorial are these for young men swallowed by an avalanche and now lie in this foreign field that is forever none of them. Grave markers tilted under flat leaf pine, names elbow deep in fern, stone, scoured by rain and time. Men who in one demented summer came from Kansas, Minnesota, Maine, kitted with picks and spades, not guns for victory. Told they could pluck gold from rivers quick as raspberries, were fed a false prospectus like those other dead. James Edward Doran, 1898. John Morgan, Daniel Molyneux, George Risser, C.P. Harris, Walter Chapper, Thomas Culloden, more and more young men. Palm Sunday, April 1898. These and the eloquence of irises. Right at the beginning of our trip, I started my research at the Goldrush Museum in Seattle. When we were coming out of the museum, we were caught in a rather scary alt-right march. This poem is a little bit about that and its resonance and relevance. Fake nuggets, mock displays of banks and stores, photos of horses, sleds and dogs, miners in mucklucks, parkers, mitts, Indian packers humping gear across their stolen land for pay. Hotel Seattle's not too far from here. The story goes that Skookum Jim got drunk, threw gold and banknotes from the balcony, watched white men on the pavement down below grab at the fluttering air, snatch nuggets from the fingers of their friends. Outside the museum doors, police lock bicycles to stem a baying tide of balaclavas. The paramedic bathes a woman's eyes, red raw from pepper spray. The slogan on her banner reads, "Immigrants, go home." It's rather ironic, as the desecration of First Nation land was largely caused by white immigrants, and a lot of the richness of Seattle now rests upon it. Mountain Voices. This has found its way into a climate change magazine, which wasn't its intention, but I see now why it might have made that particular journey. Mountain Voices. Do we learn anything from history? The stranded polar bear, the rising sea. So used they were to broken things, smashed oil lamps, wine jars, rattled urns, the creak of houses, tumbling masonry, they just shrugged off the portents of a mountain's rage, repaired their fallen walls, and soldiered on. Those who could read the writing in spring wind, suns scribbled messages on ice, told prospectors it was dangerous, warned of a snowpack in the mountain's throat, before it raised its mighty voice and spoke. So when Vesuvius spewed its guts and 2 millennia on, a slice of snow broke loose from nature's moorings, smothering everything. Too late in either case to call for gods, too sudden for the moment's fending off. Some were found curled to fetuses or fused together in a last embrace, some frozen in a running shape or curled like cats asleep, heads on their forearms under ash or snow, perplexed perhaps to hear their mountain before the snow or lava outran everyone. When writing this, I found a photograph, an unnamed man in glasses, balding, elderly. He holds against a sky blue shirt a plaster cast, a body of a child from Herculaneum, hands splayed across the tiny back. So tenderly, you'd think the child and his heart might break. From the mid-19th century to the mid-90s, the Canadian government separated thousands of First Nation children from their parents and placed them in schools run by the church, ostensibly to assimilate them. They were taught that their belief systems were wrong, they were forbidden to speak their language and or exercise their culture. This is the penultimate poem in the book, and the last one I'm going to read. The book is a gift to the First Nation peoples of Yukon, many of whom strive to regain the way of life they lost after the Great Stampede. Land is not my school, my history. My land was never disemboweled for gain, nor have I roots grown down so deep in it that in my bones I know it to be mine. I am not subject to a season's laws, nor do they govern where I stay or go. I have no homeland to be taken back, no drum to beat that no one listens to, no shaman to recover what I've lost, no frog to heal or teach me to be wise, no elders to pass on the lore learned from the throat songs of my ancestors. Language was not stolen from my mouth, nor did my children grow up separate. I cannot know how loss worries or hold a potlatch, ancient griefs, but fashion stories with a poet's tongue, your stories walking in my skin. make them anew, and give them back of rights, of heritage, your living land. Thank you all very much for listening.
Thank you so much, Chrys. That was such a wonderful session. I mean, packed from the front, from the very outset, to the last poem that you read, your story is walking in my skin. A brilliant new perspective on a contemporary perspective on this late 19th century event, historical event, which affected the lives. I think what history does not do often is get down to the level of reality, the level of reality where the individual experiences, the small little individual experiences are often ignored. Poetry, as I said at the very outset, perhaps goes down those crevices and touches those little things which history thinks too trivial to touch upon, because history is in too much of a hurry, is in too much of a hurry to get as much as in its portmanteau bag as possible, and misses the small little things, the real moments of human insight, pain, happiness, joy, surprise, whatever. And the poetic run that we have had this evening, when you read through your poem from your latest collection, has actually reflected that. You talked about, and I was absolutely fascinated because you kept mentioning about the raven in the early poems, and then this trickster figure in the first poem that you read of the storyteller. And I'm just reminded of another Aboriginal tradition in Australia. I think you're aware of that as well. I'm reminded of a particular short story by the Aboriginal writer David Unaipon, where you have this legend of the green frog, again, very uncannily coming and almost doing the same thing that the frog here seemingly does. I mean, it emerges from the clear water, is taught by the lyrebird in the arts of ventriloquism, and becomes better at it than its master, the lyrebird itself, till it is almost seen as a spirit, worshipped as a spirit, because not only can it get the voices of every bird and every beast and every natural phenomenon through its own vocal cords, but it can invoke the spirit of those moments in the people who are listening. So this kind of totemic figure who narrates, and you taking over that figure, that voice, and that legend, the lore in the First Nations narratives that you encountered, and using that in contemporary poetry that you're writing right now. Poetry cannot be an act of reparation for injustices done or in violence inflicted in the past. But it can obviously, as I said, and I think you will agree with me. What you have done in your poems, it seems that you have reached out and formed a kind, or allowed your readers to form that kind of, I might say, imaginative bridge, if you might possibly say. Certain moments which may have or may not have historical authenticity, but definitely are invested with human capital, I think. I think it's been a brilliant run. We have been given such a, because, the issues about originality in Canada, as we, get to know from time to time, even here in India, I mean, they're still raw. Some of the wounds are still raw, and the actual rights to places and the rights to property, they're still very thorny issues, as we all know. They are in Australia, they are in Canada even today. I mean, I'm just reminded off the cuff of one incident in 1995 in the Caribou region. I think it was the blockade of Gustafson Lake, where people were, the entire Canadian paramilitary forces were mobilized to encounter the threat posed by so-called Aboriginal people who were, living in disguise and trying to form blockades, preventing white people from getting in there. So I think some of the dregs of some of the issues which began in the late 19th century, and especially with the gold rush, the Klondike Goldrush in 87, 88. In 1887, 97, 98. Sorry, they seem to be living issues even today. Also, I think at some point you I think touched the chord about that this is a testament. There's a last poem that you dedicated, for example. It was a testament to survival instincts of individuals and cultures. I think that's also your tribute at this point. I had to say a little something about this entire idea of the myth of the dying race, because the Aboriginals were thought to be, and you mentioned the fact that they were put into schools. They were the halfway to assimilation, of course, and this was almost seen as inevitable, almost a desirable assimilation. That this cultural distinctness, this kind of posing a challenge to white supremacy, perhaps in terms of culture, it was not seen as something right, and that had to be somehow quelled through assimilation. Again, the same thing happened in Australia, as we all know that. After a few generations, very few pure-blooded Aboriginal people remained because they had been so put into the cycle of being married with white women and things like that. So their offspring would generally, the color would change and everything would change. So not just cultural memory, but even their physical attributes would change over a period of time. So that was there. So all of that seems to be packed into your poetry. I had one specific question to start off the question and answer session. After this wonderful set of readings and quiet nudges that you've been giving us as to the historical context that lies behind all of your poetry. Especially I wanted to talk about the Palm Sunday Avalanche poem, where you also drew a parallel with the First World War memory of Flanders Field. Of course, that mention was also there. So could you speak a little bit about what you might say, the connection that you made between two cataclysmic losses? I mean, here was a bevy of young men who lost their lives, and again, the same thing happened in the First War. Not too many years in between these two events, you might say. So again, and which probably brought it in your mind together. And how did you see? How did you contextualize that? The wastage, the sheer waste, the human waste that you talk about in that poem.
Well, the parallels seem to be very clear. While at Dai, one of the things you first came across with these extraordinary fields of irises, and that was so resonant of, what is it, in Flanders Fields the poppies grow. I can't remember who wrote that one, but it was so resonant of that, and such a futile waste of time, Kitchener appointing your country needs you and sending them off to what was undoubtedly their deaths in many, many cases. So, and I suppose these they went off thinking they were doing brave and important things, but all of them, it came to sad ends. And just looking at the gravestones in Dai Cemetery, Slide Cemetery, it obviously I touch on that poem by Rupert Brooke. What is it? I can't remember the poem now. What's the line? In a foreign field. I can't remember the poem, but it's a Rupert Brooke quote. Just reminded me of that, the same sort of sense. I don't really know how to answer the question, Devashish. It was just very, very resonant when I was there. The gravestones, the names, on Memorial Sunday, we hear people reading out the names, and there they were from all over the world. There was a reference, somebody from Scotland. I didn't come across anybody from India, but I've no doubt that people would have gone from India too, although I didn't find a record. Do you know anything? Is there any record of prospectors going from India?
No, Chrys. Not at that time. Not at that time in history. Pradipta, do you see any questions that some of our listeners might be putting to us for Chrys?
Devashi, I'm coming across all kinds of congratulatory messages for Chrys. The audience has tremendously enjoyed the session and they are congratulating Madam Chrys Salt for her brilliant rendition of her poems. As of now, we have not had any question as such, but lots of congratulatory messages.
Hopefully, I answered them all then in the poems. Obviously, you can't hope, and I missed quite a lot out. There was one poem I should have read, which was about Bennett Lake, where we landed on Bennett Lake with a very, very small float plane, which flew over the Chilkoot Pass, and we saw how absolutely impossible it must have been, the Golden Stairs, which were steps just cut out of the ice, which they hauled themselves up by ropes. And we were hoping that the pilot knew where he was going, because had he not known where he was going, we could well have hit a mountain. And it was about, this float plane was about the size of a family car. There were 4 of us in there with the pilot, and we landed on Bennett Lake, which was where the prospectors would have made their boats, cut down the trees. But actually, very few of them had any knowledge or experience in boat building. So what the lookouts saw coming down the Yukon River, which we gone up in our little rowing boat, and actually moored ourselves on an island and lit a fire, put stones around it to get some sort of sense of what it might have felt like. From his small life in his village with very, very few people, he would have seen this flotilla of boats coming down the Yukon. Must have thought, he would never have thought there were so many people out there. No mobile phones, no computer connections. How would you have known? All these people, I mean, thousands and thousands powering down the Yukon. The noise, they had dogs, they had horses on their boats. The noise must have been absolutely horrendous. So, I mean, I could read you that poem if you want. I do have the Bennett Lake in here. If I can find it. Would you like me to read that one, as you have no questions? Should I be able
Please
to
go ahead. Please go ahead, Chrys. Please do.
Let me find it first. When I'm looking through the book, I'm seeing poems about a bear we met when we were there, which was
exactly. I was going to ask you about the bear poem. Yes.
He was snuffling at our radiator, and only when we looked across the road at the rock on the other side, there were two little cubs who were obviously waiting for their mummy. We didn't get out of the car. They're enormous. I don't think I'd have liked to have given them a sandwich. Would you like me to read Bennett Lake? Yes? You like this one?
Yes.
Yeah, sure. Okay. Please read it.
Please do.
Right, here we go. Easy for us landing on the lake. Our pilot helps us off along a wing to a damp strand where men made camp, built crazy boats sweating against the clock, whipsawed green wood, swore, nailed and tarred before blue ice thwarted their passage. Strength and food ran out, betting against a loaded dice. Each frenzied hammer blow might bring them closer to their goal. The landscape's different now. Pines flourish down the slopes, a shawl of silence drapes the lake's perimeter where once their rowdy tented city sprang. Rations, boots, outfits, sleds heaped where unflustered sand arcs gold along the shore, and over heedless stones, over the lies of easy maps, the lottery of hope, their broken bones, indifferent water laps. It's impossible to imagine, isn't it, what it must have been like. I mean, Dawson City, which started off with just a few thousand people, ended up which was a city en route to the goldfields, ended up with about 30,000. And the First Nation people decamped. There was nowhere for them to be. So,
Well, I mean, thank you so much, Chrys, again, for reading the bear poem. And I was wondering, because, you know, we talk a lot as teachers to our students in class about the pitfalls of post-colonialism. I mean, there was the heyday of post-colonialism, as you know, in the academy around the turn of the century. I mean, at the end of the 20th century, the beginning of the 21st, that was the heyday, around the 1990s. And then again, post-colonialism has gone through a lot lately, and in the last 5 to 10 years, at least, I mean, it has been on the slide downwards. One of the principal reasons that we have to explain this to our students is that most students, and I think they are not wrong in doing that, in assuming that, is that post-colonialism is cast in a binary mode all the time, one thing opposed to the other. Often in life, and the great lesson of life and the great lesson of almost every culture is that binaries really do not help. I mean, they might entrench positions, you might have heated political positioning and dogmatism on both sides of a kind of, we have had terms like nativism being passed around in theory. But I think what your poetry, what your collection, the very trajectory that you have taken with your poems, which is suggested. I mean, for example, you've talked as much about the white man as about the Aboriginal experience, as about the way in which, at some level, they are all human beings. I mean, the 3-act love story that you have read, I mean, poems you have read from that, the wonderful little sequence that you have. I mean, they are testament to experiences, moments of insight, or of whatever you might call it, just human moments of frailty, vulnerability, being somehow suddenly overwhelmed by circumstances, by nature. It would happen to anyone, to an Aboriginal as much to a white man. And at that level, bringing it down to that level, it's all human. You have to understand that at certain points there are crossings over. There are, of course, some kinds of bonds being forged. And this binarity of post-colonialism, you know, that people always read that, oh, this is Aboriginal culture, this is white culture. So, you know, your poetry, your book has shown us, I mean, the way in which you've read and which you've articulated your poems has shown us, for example, that you know, it's all something. For example, the great way in which we always remember the Klondike Goldrush is, of course, Charles Chaplin's Gold Rush. I mean, of course, and Jack London. You mentioned Jack London and Service's poems, and so, you know, I mean, I'm talking about largely the experience of the Klondike Gold Rush. I mean, it's about them and us, this kind of divide, the post-colonial divide, of course, binarism that is at the heart of post-colonialism. You seem to have somehow gone beyond that. I mean, lately, towards the end of the post-colonial cycle, talk was about finding the third space. Theorists like Edward Sawyer were being tossed around with the academy, with students, talked about finding of this third space. Now, this third space of enunciation, as we call it in theory, of course, is something very similar to this human experience, this human bonding, where the divides, the divisiveness of historical writing, casting one side and the other side of it, is really somehow overwritten, you know, and the human element comes to the fore. I mean, what artists, what poets, what writers, what anybody who has cared to see with feeling eyes, what they touch upon, what they find as that nerve that they can touch, that they can, you know, find a pulse from and maybe relate it back to their writing at the end of it. So I think that, you know, the great myth, of course, being of the adventure, you know, that whenever you talk about the Yukon, it's about adventure. It's about the myth of the self-made man. You know, there is that perhaps, but there is also a little bit more of the floundering of men, of the wastage, of the sheer wastage of youth and human capital over there. I mean, there is so much over there on both sides.
I think
Yeah, Chrys, please.
I was just thinking, sort of reading it through, I realised that this sort of the personification of the raven, the frog, the wife of are very much rooted in the other side of my life, which is the dramatist side. So it's or the actor side, where you get inside and imagine what it's like to be the frog scrabbling up the side of the ditch, or be the raven. And of course, one of the problems which I have encountered when writing this is the problem which I'm sure you're all aware of, which is the question about appropriation of First Nation stories. And that has been quite problematic for me. How to do that, thinking and feeling strongly that it's a story that really does need to be shared, that the story, their losses do need to be shared. I mean, when you go there now, the landscape is still completely disemboweled. People are still searching for gold. The land has still been destroyed. So I'm hoping to go to the Yukon. I would like to have the conversation about appropriation, and I know it's a really, really important one for First Nation people, because so much has been taken away that what is left for them is their stories. So if somebody powerful and white takes away their stories, they're taking away quite a lot. And when I was at the Northwest Territories Festival, I heard a throat singer called Tanya Tagak, who would have this debate with me, because she feels very strongly that the stories are theirs to be told. And she was taken away from her family as a child, and the throat songs. She appeared at the Northwest Territories Festival, courtesy of Bjork originally, and as a result of that had become quite famous. So she'd returned to the festival to tell, as to say thank you, really. And there are about 30 of us in this room. So this amazing, amazing, amazing woman singing these songs, those visceral, life-changing songs about that experience of being taken away. So, it gave one a real entrance into the anguish and the sense of loss that they feel. And I suppose I was hoping that by animating frogs and the salmon and telling the stories from another angle, they might forgive me for sharing the stories with a wider audience like you, who may never have heard them without this talk. It's a difficult one. It's a really difficult one, and I hope hence it's my gift to them. I hope they receive it in the spirit of which it's been given. But I don't know if anybody from Yukon is listening in. Maybe they are. They will have had the link. We'll see. What are your views on that?
Right. I mean, I'm so glad, Chrys, that you brought up this question of legitimacy, because this is always a bit of a problem, writing about the Aboriginal experience anywhere, for what they consider is someone who's an outsider. I mean, for someone to ventriloquize the voice of an insider Aboriginal in a narrative, in a whether it's poetry or in prose, it's always a rather fraught matter. And whether they accept that, and whether they allow, or that person, that imaginative freedom of the writer to go and explore and then express himself or herself. I mean, that is a very difficult place. I mean, as you say, I mean, if they have been kind, I mean, that's wonderful, and hopefully their experience also of their own past might be a new dimension might be added to it. I mean, I'm not saying that the memories, the stories that have been handed down in families, for example, of Aboriginal families will necessarily change. But then again, they will have a different perspective of the entire historical process. Sometimes when we have our head in the sand so much sometimes that we are so involved with a certain, as I said, a very dogmatic position in terms of how I believe or what I believe in terms of historical truths, in terms of my own cultural legacy, that sometimes it is impossible for me to see another possibility, another path, another avenue being traced by another writer or philosopher or thinker. So, sometimes this is extraordinary what you've done. And I must thank you on behalf of Inspirare India. Pradipta is off screen. Has she gone off screen? Fine. I mean, we can wait for her to come back. It's just, I think, a minute or something like that. So I read your frog poems with great interest, the ones that you sent me before, and it is from there that I find these lines. When the raven stole the sun and day was made, mine was the gift of elements to pass from land to water, enter dreams, sing frog song in the ears of men. And then you write, I shine, I shimmer, as in dreams I can. You have given us dreams. We were all awake right through your session, but we were given a lot of dreams, going on. I mean, I was just listening to the flow of your lines, the lilt of your recitation, the way in which you list those lines. And I was actually taken on a kind of a trip, and I was reminded of some of the photographs that I'd seen at the Klondike Goldrush long time back. One of those iconic photographs of the long line of prospectors, which forms the very iconic cover of your book, of course, which Ronnie Goodyear has done a wonderful job with. That also kind of puts things in perspective. My own little memories of and flashes of Klondike Goldrush from the past and whatever I'd read, to whatever I was hearing in front of me, the images that were being invoked. So it was like a virtual tour. It was like a cinema. It was like unfolding. It was wonderful, Chrys. And I don't see Pradipta coming back. I can wait for another minute, and then we can wrap it up a session, and maybe wait also for if there is a quick question from someone who is listening. Let me wait for just a minute, and then we can wrap it up for the evening, Chrys.
Well, I hope I've filled it in the gaps. I mean, obviously,
sure.
A few poems that I've left out because the poem is the book is a sequence of poems which hopefully tells the story from the beginning of the discovery to the.
I've read a few poems from the book, but I really look forward to reading the book in its fullness, as they say, and giving it the full tension that it deserves, So Pradipta, back. Chrys has done a wonderful job, and has enlightened and regaled us through the evening. And I will now hand it over to my co-moderator, Dr. Pradipta Mukherjee, for this evening, to say a few words about our evening, our guest, and about what is in prospect for all listeners and supporters of Inspirare India in the future, coming future. Pradipta, please.
Thank you, Chrys. Thank you, Debashish. What an amazing session we have had. What a wonderful and passionate rendition of your poems. Thank you so much, Chrys. I would like to say that Chrys has addressed several social issues like avarice, racism, inequalities, and the threats to indigenous communities, so that through the lens of history, through the lens of poetry, she could explore issues that are so very relevant today. And I wish the session would have continued with her stories of appropriation of First Nation narratives, stories of erasure, stories of loss, and Debashish wonderfully brought in the post-colonial angle to Chrys's discussion. So thank you very much, Chrys Salt. Thank you for being with Inspirare India this evening. It was sheer delight listening to you, having you amongst us for the first live web talk, Art House, Hot House of Inspirare India. Our second live talk is... Thank you.
Absolute privilege and honor. Thank you.
Thank you. We will be hosting another live talk on the 27th of September, which will be a double header on Tintin with specific focus on Tintin in Tibet and the graphic novel, and another one on the same day on Marvel Comics. We hope to see all of you there. I would like to thank our executive advisory board members for their support. I'm sure they have all been with us the entire evening. Thank you, Anitesh Chakraborty and Akash Ganguly, for your technical support. And finally, to all our audience for joining us this evening from India and across the globe. Thank you all on behalf of Inspirare India. Good night.
Good night.
Good night.
Thank you, Chrys, and good night.
Thank you.